All right, welcome to the very first session of CDS Infernalis. This one has mashed together a couple of blueprints. It's our governance discussion, so this will be both the governance as well as there was some update to our Ceph user committee, which was originally started by Loic. Eric is now in charge of the user committee. I don't believe he's been able to make it unless he's on one of the dial-ins. Eric, are you here? Can you give a shout? Or an IRC? All right. Well, I'm not seeing him. So yeah, Eric is the current reigning chair of our Ceph user committee. The user committee was originally started as kind of the first baby steps towards governance. It was to give the users actual purchase over some of the Ceph community. They tend to run things like our user the release notes and things like that. They look at who committed what and kind of put that together. They also are a very strong presence in organizing our meetups and facilitating those. If you have meetups, go ahead and check out our mailing list page and send them a list note to the Ceph user committee mailing list. There are resources available to them that they can help your meetup be bigger, better, faster, stronger. So go ahead and take a look at that if you want. For now, I was going to run us through some of the Ceph governance, which has been a long, long, long time in coming. It's gone through many iterations. As many of you know, before the acquisition by Red Hat, we had looked at moving the Ceph IP into a third-party foundation setup. The front runner when we were looking at that was the Linux Foundation. We were going to run Ceph as a collaborative project, similar to what Zen and others have done. Obviously, going to Red Hat, they have a bit of a different approach, and given that they're all open source all the time, they really think they are better at running their own projects internally. So we've had to kind of pivot and adjust our thinking to take a look at kind of the Ceph governance structure and how it's going to work and the moving pieces in a post Red Hat world. So there in the blueprint, I have included, for those of you that are logged in, you can scroll down to the attachment section where there was the 3 PDFs that are attached. I've also direct linked them above in the summary section. There are 3 docs. There's the charter. That's more or less just an overview of kind of our goals, principles, a bit of the who, what, where. Then there's the governance doc, which is all the meaty details of how we are looking at running the Ceph governance, as well as a trademark doc. And I figure we'd just kind of leaf through these a bit, take a look. I welcome comment, any feedback, questions, just go ahead and shout them out via voice or text. I absolutely want the community to be involved in building this governance. I don't want this to be something that Red Hat hands down from on high and says this is the way of the world. That's never been the way we do things in the Ceph project, and I don't want to start now. So definitely this is your opportunity to speak up and let me know what you think about the governance. So I'll start with the Ceph charter. Obviously just a little bit about what we're going for, kind of the whole change the world with open source vision that Sage started on so long, long ago. Obviously we're trying to figure out ways to do to proprietary storage vendors what Linux did to things like Unix and Ultrix and things like that. So that's kind of what's colored all of our thinking and how we're approaching Ceph and how we're approaching this governance stuff. So we want it to be very open and very participatory and led by the leaders in our community, both corporate and non. Obviously, the biggest thing that you can take away from this charter, beyond the fact that we're open source diehards, is that transparency is a big part of what we want this governance to be for us. The transparency in everything that we do. We want to make sure that everything from engineering decisions, the minutia of implementation, all the way up to broad sweeping kind of strategic initiatives. All the things that we do, we want to make sure that those are done in public and recorded for later scrutiny. We don't want any water cooler discussions. We don't want kind of people doing things in secret and then suddenly having the world change around those who are helping us build it. The next portion here, IP management. This is a big portion of what we want the Ceph board to help us do. The governance structure should allow those participating in it to make sure that the Ceph copyright, the Ceph brand, and all of the moving pieces therein are being treated appropriately by the community and all of those participating. Obviously we want the Ceph board to drive other things like adoption and whatnot, but we also want to make sure that they're kind of taking over as the shepherds. There's one point in here that will probably differ from a foundational setup, is that if there is any enforcement, like if we have to go after anybody for building something awful and calling it Ceph and whatever, Red Hat will do that. And likes to make sure that they're the ones that have to play the bad guy. That way our community can always be the good guys. So that's the only difference from kind of a foundational setup in terms of IP management. Roles. I didn't want to outline a ton of roles and responsibilities and everything in this. I just wanted to give people an idea of who's out there, right? The project lead, Sage has long been our benevolent dictator for life. Sometimes life takes you in a different direction, though. So I wanted to make sure that the project lead was outlined in such a way that if Sage ever decided that he needed a break or wanted to retire or something, he would be able to step down, and the component technical leads, his lieutenants, would be able to find somebody to replace him. But for now, for the foreseeable future, and hopefully for the long term, Sage will continue to carry the Ceph banner in all things. That takes me to the component technical leads. Obviously, we've identified these people in a number of different places. This is like Gregory for Calamari and Josh for RBD and Hamai for CephFS. And, these are the folks that are leading the charge for the individual component stuff within the Ceph platform. These are also the folks that will probably be doing the majority of the Ceph Tech Talks. If you haven't seen those are up and running. Sam just did his Rados Tech Talk, and he's the guy leading the charge on Rados. So the idea here with this governance is to surface more of this kind of command and control infrastructure, the folks who know what's going on. We want to make sure that those are very visible, just as people like Andrew Morton are very visible in the Linux kernel community. Not everyone can go and talk to Linus. One human bag of meat does not scale. So we need to make sure that we have many bags of meat in the Ceph community that will be able to answer questions, provide development feedback, code reviews, and all of the good things. So we want to make sure that this governance is kind of surfacing the stuff that's underneath that sometimes gets lost in other projects. So governance, you can think of it less as a means of control or an iron fist, and more of just kind of surfacing the things that already happen organically in a way that people can digest and participate in if they aren't already intimately acquainted with the Ceph community. Then obviously the important one is the committers. I would like to do more to both recognize and thank our committers. Loic and the user community and Eric and several other committers have done a good job of identifying, who our top contributors are, where they're from, who's working on what, and those sorts of statistics. Also, a good snapshot of that is available from the metrics.ceph.com dashboard, but definitely would like to recognize our committers. We're very appreciative of our community, and they do a lot for us. So if you can think of other good ways, please don't hesitate to let me know. And then a little bit about the governance structure. Don't want this to be too heavy-handed. Definitely want to kind of keep it lightweight as much as possible, as much as you can when you get giant behemoth organizations involved. But we're looking at kind of three main bodies with maybe a couple of little groups that will splinter off and do things on their own. But the main workload will be done by the Ceph board, which is very much outlined in the next doc we'll look at. There's the technical committee, These are the component technical leads. This is where all of the implementation, where the metal meets the meat. This is where the things get done. This is developers only. It will not be under the purview or control of the board. It will be kind of separate to make sure that engineering decisions are being made by engineers and correctly, and not guided by folks who have perhaps other interests. And then the user committee obviously has already been going strong. We would like to allow the user committee to grow and perhaps take on some new roles. There was talk at one point of giving them the keys to the website, the blog, letting them develop content and expand that. Obviously, this hasn't happened quite yet. I think it's probably because the user committee, a lot of people don't even know it exists. It was going to be a part of our governance, and we just haven't surfaced it as much because governance has been in so much flux lately. But definitely want to make sure that the user committee is going strong. Looking at the development process, you can take a look at this. It's just trying to outline a bit of the minutia for people that are new coming in. Obviously, most of the people on this call already know what's going on, the normal Git branching model, code review, how blueprints work, all of the pieces that you've all been intimately aware of for a long time now. There's a little bit about conflict resolution in here. This will probably get fleshed out a little bit more, but mostly we just want to make sure that there's safety release valves so that we don't have giant conflicts between folk, and there's a way to resolve conflict in an amicable fashion. But so far we haven't seen a lot of need for that. You all have been very easygoing and accepting, especially when bumbling community managers break things like the wiki. So I appreciate that. Are there any questions on just kind of the general charter, the who, what, when, where? I obviously welcome feedback from anyone at any time, but now is definitely the time to throw things in the pot. Barring any questions, we'll keep going. Ceph governance details. So the idea here is to kind of create a group of prominent representatives of the Ceph ecosystem. So whoever those folks may be. The idea is to, it's less about taking individual users and making them decision makers. I figure individual users will participate within the user community and the user committee, and that user committee chair will have a seat on the board and represent those users' interests. This way our individual users don't have to take huge amounts of time and effort and sink that into participating in a board. Those of you who have been participating in the OpenStack board know that as things grow, it can become a giant time sink, and I don't want that. How about now, Loic? Can you talk? Loic?
Yes.
There you are, and now we can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to say that something that surfaced recently is the fact that since most developers are within Red Hat, we tend to have some resources that are not accessible to the community in general. So, for instance, URLs that point to VPN IPs. We, as Red Hat employee, we do not notice that someone from the outside does not have access. So we actually care about that, and since I'm not always connected to the VPN, I tend to notice more than most. So that's an area where we are currently working on to make sure that the community has all permissions to participate. In the past, when it was Inktank, that didn't happen so much. But because of the internal reorganization, that's something that we have to tackle. That is kind of new, and hopefully it will disappear in a few months.
And actually, as a side note to that, most of the VPN resources are in our testing lab, the Sepia lab. There will also be a publicly available community test lab that has just come along. So I just got done spending about $500,000 of Red Hat's money to build a community test lab. There have been some ops hurdles in terms of getting that deployed and accessible, but bear in mind that that will be coming probably within the next few months. As we migrate away from the stuff that's still sitting in DreamHost racks, there will be a public test cluster available in addition to the internal VPN resources that Loic was just talking about. So that will be nice. That's where a lot of our donated hardware from some of the hardware vendors that we've been partnering with, the Dells and the Intels and the HGSTs of the world, a lot of that hardware will be going into the community test lab, where anyone and everyone will be able to run their tests against real hardware with real Ceph cluster running, so that to make sure that it's available. So yeah, definitely that is in mind as a part of, or as an extension of, I guess, a lot of this governance work, is to make sure that our community has all the same resources as anyone within Red Hat. Oh, and Eric just arrived. Awesome. Welcome him. Okay. Was that all, Loic, or did you have anything else on the Ceph charter or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay. So the next one there is the Ceph governance doc. This is a little bit more of the meaty details of how the Ceph governance structure is supposed to work. Some of this is a little rough. I wanted to kind of get it out there before I really took some time to polish it. I want to make sure that there's nothing completely out of whack, that our community had a chance to chew on it for a bit and give me feedback. So as I mentioned, the idea here is to have three main groups: the board, the technical committee, and the user committee. And as I was just saying a minute ago, the idea is for prominent representatives of the Ceph kind of ecosystem to be represented rather than individual users. My thinking is the Ceph board will probably be larger groups of folk that are committing, just to kind of give each of those larger groups of folk a lightning rod into the Ceph community. Just like the user committee chair will take all of the generic user comments, feedback, etc., needs, desires into the board. I figured that larger organizations like SUSE and Canonical and a few other folks have also expressed interest, but those two folks I've already talked to, and I know they're interested in participating. You know, all of these people have groups of engineers that are dedicated to Ceph, and I wanted to make sure that those voices were heard in terms of direction and approach and just general community growth, adoption, and management. So basically, it's taking all of the disparate groups of folk that are working on Ceph, giving them a representative voice within the board to participate. All right, so the expectations. Obviously, the board will have a number of functions, but obviously the biggest one for the board is going to be helping with community outreach and evangelism, the adoption play, how we're telling people what we're doing, all of the various resources that are available, welcoming new people in, and making sure that the Ceph project is shepherded along in a healthy and productive manner. You know, there's a lot of different ways that we'll be able to go about this, but I figured that there will be four kind of main functions of the board, right? They would promote and advocate. They would enforce. Maybe enforce is too strong of a word, but definitely oversee and gently police. They will maintain and they will advise. So promoting, obviously, there was a lot of project messaging, things that are going on, driving activities around events like Ceph Days, maybe conferences or events like that. Maybe content generation. I would love to see some collaboration on performance profiling, maybe some white papers or other articles that can get written that aren't necessarily pushed through by Red Hat associated folk. So it would be nice to do that. And then obviously just general marketing and PR, AR type relations. As a side note, I'm also looking at a AR, PR initiative with the Ceph community that would be handed to the board as a resource. Right now, most of the Ceph notices that go out to the press or analysts' relations when they have questions about what's going on in the world of Ceph. All of that's handled through Red Hat. And as a community guy who's very focused on open source, that feels wrong to me. It feels awkward. There's times when SUSE or Canonical or Intel or somebody is going to do something really interesting with Ceph. And it doesn't make sense for Red Hat to talk about it. I mean, maybe we could say, attaboy, way to go. But to me, it feels like maybe Red Hat would to some people, be perceived as trying to take credit as others' work. And I definitely don't want that to happen. So one thing we're going to be looking at in the near future is having Ceph, the project, have its own kind of press agency, have its own agency to represent things that are going on upstream in the project, as well as being able to agnostically represent all things that people are doing with regards to Ceph. There was a push a while ago where SUSE launched their cloud that had Ceph-backed portions. I would have loved to make a lot more noise about that and really help generate some buzz. Similar to some of the cool stuff that Canonical continues to do with Juju for Ceph. There's a lot of really awesome stuff going on in the Ceph community that we can't really make noise about as Red Hat. And I want to make sure that those things are being surfaced and represented appropriately to the world at large. And this would be something that the ARPR initiative will come a little bit behind some of this other governance stuff, but eventually it will be handed over to the board to manage and govern and oversee. So definitely some cool stuff coming there. We already talked about kind of the general, gentle trademark and brand policy stuff, a little bit of the conflict resolution within the project. This would all eventually come under the board purview, as well as some of the maintain and advise, right? They would make sure that the community itself continues to be supported, maybe financially, if there are avenues to do that, but obviously reducing barriers to entry for people that want to participate, and make sure that everyone that is participating within the community has what they need and is able to get what they need done. And then advising. Like I said, all of these disparate groups that would have representatives on the board, this would function as a way for those groups to bring their concerns or provide feedbacks and recommendation on technical direction of the project. Hey, we just built this cool new widget and it's going to do these awesome things for Ceph, and we're going to be committing, a 20,000 line patch in 2 months, just to let you know. And other people can be involved and decide kind of what the priorities are, what's coming, and Sage will be able to better coordinate then what's going into the project, and we'll know when cool things are coming. But allowing for that intergroup communication, I think, is going to be the primary function of the board. A little bit about the members and how things fit together. Executive director is probably a strong term. That was a holdover from what it would have been had it been a collaborative project. I figure I'll sit at the top of this heap and try and keep it moving in the same direction. Obviously, if other people feel like that's not a good fit, let me know. I'm obviously not tied to being king of the castle here. I just figure that I'm got all of the moving pieces in my hand currently, so I would start it off. But most of the heavy lifting would be done by the members. There will be 3 seats that we're looking at that are kind of permanently assigned to groups. So the user committee chair we've already talked about would be representing user goals, interests, and needs. The project lead, Sage, obviously would have a voting seat on the board as representative of all of the engineers that are making things happen. And then I also wanted to do something called an academic liaison. There are a number of places where Ceph is being used in academia or academic-related places, and sometimes those types of folks or organizations have very different goals and needs out of Ceph. I'm looking at places like CERN that has some different approaches. Some of the national laboratories in the U.S. Have some different needs and goals in terms of what they use for Ceph for. And I figure academically, it would be good to find someone who could represent academic interests on the board, and make sure that those voices aren't getting drowned out by those with commercial interests or other things. So this would be someone who probably would be from one of the national laboratories, or someone with a very strong academic focus. Maybe he would be a professor at a university. I don't know. But I want to make sure that that type of voice doesn't get lost in the cacophony of Ceph discussions. Membership is probably membership in the board specifically is probably the least well defined, and this is where I would like to hear thoughts from folks on what does it mean to you to have someone sitting on the Ceph board. My thought is that they should bring something to the table beyond just a human presence. Obviously, they're going to have to represent a group of some sort of people, whether that's representing the users at large, whether it's voted in OpenStack style, whether it's, I belong to a large company, we have 17 engineers and we want to make sure we have a voice. Whatever it is, I feel like they should bring more to the table. I don't know if it's a monetary contribution, whether it's personnel, whether it's a past record of excellence. I would love to hear thoughts. Anyone have ideas on what they would like to see from a board member? What does it mean to become a board member, right? Are they elected? Are they chosen because they're bringing, hey, maybe we have an election process where each person that wants to be a part of the board lists off the things they bring to the project. Like, I have a budget of $20,000 that I'd like to donate to the Ceph project. I have 17 engineers working on it. I personally have committed 18 patches and am currently maintaining this portion of the doc. Like, that would be your resume to get elected to the board or something. I don't have anything that is really hammered out. I wanted to leave this somewhat nebulous and collect feedback. Anyone? Ideas? Feedback? Complaints? Silence. All right. So what we're saying is we're going to elect guys from EMC and NetApp to run Ceph then. That's the plan I'm hearing. Oh man, shy folks. Well, feel
That would be actually a good thing. See how it works for OpenStack. That's quite interesting.
Yeah. Danny, were you trying to speak? Was that?
No, I unmuted myself. Yeah, the point is, I didn't read all the stuff. I've seen it today the first time, so yeah, maybe I guess it's the problem for more than one person here, and we have to review it, or and you get your answers on the mailing list or something like that.
That's fair. I
didn't think too much about it after reading it, and I read it only half an hour ago. So.
Okay, no, that's fair. Yeah, the blueprint. This was one of the late coming blueprints. I had not posted this during the blueprint submission process. I didn't know whether we were going to have space for it, so I didn't push it up until later. So yeah, definitely take time to review it. That's why I figured I was walking through this now a little bit to give people a taste, give the flavor and the context around the words now. None of this is set in stone. There obviously will be portions that have not been considered. But that's the one major piece that I would love feedback on more than any of the rest of it. I want to know what it means to have a board member, right? I want to keep this board artificially small. I don't want more than maybe 8, 10, 12 people. I don't want a 20, 30 person board. Those, when it gets big like that, it becomes unwieldy and it's hard to get anything done. But yeah.
Yeah. By any chance, could you add somewhere editable version or text file or something like that? I mean, something you can easily use in the email also.
Yes. Sorry. My idea was to drop this all in the Ceph Etherpad. So.
That, yeah.
Yep. I will actually make 3 separate Etherpads because these are pretty long, extensive documents. So So yeah, as soon as we're done with this session and the calamari session starts, I will go in and edit the Infernalis page, and I'll make a charter, governance, and trademark policy Etherpads so that people can poke at it, make notes, whatnot.
Great.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see, going through this, I want to make sure there's nothing else in here that's terribly informative. All right, so no, that's the bulk of the governance details, and obviously the one major piece that I want. The only other one that was remaining was the trademark policy. And if you look at the trademark doc, there's a short segment, well, short is a relative term in this case, I guess, at the top. It's mostly the CentOS trademark policy, mostly just a rip and replace with Ceph for CentOS. Very simple. It's not very explicit. Does a good job of taking the major use cases and kind of says, if there's anything else, ask us. I think this is the one I'm going to go with. It's much more lightweight, and it's not terribly difficult for someone to read through briefly in Grok. Below it, you'll see a section that's marked deprecated. This was the much longer version that we started with. It's very much more akin to the Fedora trademark guidelines, and it's very, very long. It's like 10, 12 pages long. Very explicit, a lot of non-commercial versus business versus promotional and publications, things that require permission versus those that don't, unapproved uses, OEM preloads, and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. This one was much more explicit, but I think it takes a lot longer for a human individual to go through and actually get their questions answered. So I'd rather kind of go lightweight, but obviously I welcome feedback in either direction.
One question about the software-related users and the acceptable users in this case. What refers bit for bit identical copies of official Ceph releases to are these binary packages, or is it RPM or Debian package, or is it the source code copy?
I think that was deliberately left a little bit vague because there's a number of bit for bit ways that you can distribute Ceph, whether it's part of a package or whether they bit for bit snag it from GitHub. I think it's more just if this is the same thing as upstream uses, that's kind of what that means.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric, definitely. I agree. That was the purpose of the board, was to make sure that you didn't have 3 people from Red Hat. That's why I made my own seat a non-voting seat. And so Sage would be pretty much the only Red Hat representative on the board for governance. His input there was saying that make sure that no one organization has a monopoly. Yeah, definitely. And that's why I was thinking that board members would be more representative of groups. So there'd be one person who would come from SUSE, or one from Canonical, or one from Intel or HGST or whoever, any other group. We would just make sure that they represented not only their own commercial interests, but that perhaps we started aggregating groups within. But yeah, that's the thinking. No monopolies. Want to make sure everyone has an equal voice and that no one is being drowned out by Red Hat or anyone else. But specifically, I want to make sure that Red Hat does not have too much of a dominant voice as well. Eric, are you on somewhere where you can actually talk? A microphone connection of some sort?
I have a question in the meantime.
Yeah.
So this is like such groups like that, they either care for their members or for the general public. That is when the ultimate goal of Ceph is to change the way we use storage. It's the future of storage. So there is something that goes beyond the technical stuff, more philosophical. So it could be that in the charter, the goal is to make sure the needs of everyone, governments, civil society, I don't know if we say that in English, but and companies, of course, are being taken care of, and that it's not just an organization, a group that takes care of the well-being of its members. It goes beyond that. They feel that people coming to the Ceph organization would be willing to consider the well-being of all mankind. But it's a bit grandiose, I guess, to say it like that, but you get the idea.
Yeah, so thinking beyond just the scope of caring about Ceph users and Ceph contributors, saying that the reason that we're changing the world for storage is to make storage cheaper and to thereby improve the lives of other people not necessarily directly involved. I think
Which
that's
Eric
fair.
are you asking about?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I suppose there probably are multiple people with Eric. I was seeing if Eric Murgaya had joined us yet. I was hoping that he would get away. Our user committee chair. But clearly not. Loic, would it be helpful? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the origins of the Ceph user committee so that it's not just me continuing to ramble on, where you started it, where it has come since under Eric's guidance, and a bit about the folks involved and where we might take it from here. I didn't want to dominate this with my governance stuff. I also wanted to talk about what was existing and perhaps surface the user committee a bit.
Yeah. So originally, the Ceph User Committee was born because there was Calamari being proprietary. That was the turning point. So as we felt the need, we users of Ceph felt the need to organize to make sure we can have free software to do what we need. Because when proprietary software shows up, it means it will only care for the needs of a selected group of people. So it's we, that is the founding members of the Ceph User Committee, wanted to have a solution that is long-term, not encumbered by things like you cannot do that with Ceph, you cannot expand, you cannot modify it. So that was the origin of the Ceph User Committee. Now, a lot has happened since then, and when a group is created, it's mostly useless to just state that we don't want that or that we want that. We wanted to actually do something. So we started to organize meetups so we can talk about what we want, what we don't, how we will get to use the new Ceph version in a context that is different from the Ceph days, where at the time Inktank, it was a good place for Inktank to actually meet customers and also convey information to the users, but it was not exclusively a place where users could meet and freely talk about what went wrong or what they want, or even dream about things that were completely impossible. And so we did that, and because I'm a developer, I started to do things that are not directly useful to Ceph as a project, but to get a feeling that we are a community, that we exist. And one thing I started to do is to just acknowledge the contribution of everyone in the Ceph project. That is, just go over all the commits and see who is actually doing some work and listing them. And it was also interesting because then organizations showed up that you wouldn't expect, like universities or nonprofit organizations such as the Debian project. Some people contributed on behalf of nonprofit organizations. and also governmental organizations. So it turned out to be something we could do. We could use to help identify where we belong. Since I've been acquired by Red Hat, so that's a joke because I have been hired, not acquired. I should refrain from doing jokes because I'm French, so that does not work so well. I stopped being involved in the Ceph user committee because I was no longer objective. Of course, I could claim that I could still be objective and represent the Ceph user committee, but that's not really true when you get paid by your employer. As time passes, you care more for the needs of your employer and less for the needs of everyone. So that's when Eric started to be involved. And, well, the latest things he did was to organize in the southwest of France a meetup where a surprisingly high number of people meet to discuss Ceph and develop new software. So they have a Calamari equivalent, that kind of thing. And regarding the Ceph user committee, that's pretty much all there is at the moment, which is not ideal. It could be a lot more because Ceph has so much potential for everyone. But I guess it's yet to be done, and maybe the organization that you laid out, Patrick, will help that.
Yeah, definitely. So we are actually running way over, and my alarm didn't go off for the session. That's the hard part of running session and running your mouth. So I do want to stop this and move it over to Calamari, but hopefully this gives you enough of an introduction into the world of Ceph governance, the user committee, the board, and other things. Please chew on this, digest it, and give me feedback. I would like to start pushing this through in the weeks to come so that we can have Ceph governance and make sure that there is a strong representation for our community that is non-Red Hat. So thank you very much, and we'll get this one moving.